Hello, welcome to all the delegates who are participating in this session, wherein I'll be covering about the advising, replying with letters or emails which have been received from the department. There are several communications which do come from the department, wherein they would have put across certain aspects on which the SC is required to respond. Coming to departmental interaction, what are some of the important safeguards which are required to be taken? The letters and notices which come from the department, the envelope cover should be retained. This is for the purpose of evidence for the date of receipt. Of course, now even email has got legal recognition. And in the last 1 year in the COVID pandemic scenario, there has been a lot of communication which is taking place from the department, from their official email IDs. So the replies also may have to be given in respect of such email communications. One is by way of taking a printout of the entire letter, as well as the annexures, signing it off. Printout is taken on the letterhead, scanning it and sending it to the official email ID which has been shared by the officer. In addition, also the entire set to be sent by hard copy RPAD letter to the same concerned officer's address. Okay. Telephone, of course, it's an oral communication. It is not a preferable mode of communication to the department because there is also no evidence of the correspondence which is taking place. When the letters are sent to the department, all the correspondences to the departmental officers ensure that it is acknowledged, and if that's not being done, a copy has to necessarily be sent by RPAD. In fact, that is the best way, so that there is no need of unnecessary interfacing in person. Also in the pandemic times, this may also be a very good safety measure or a safeguarding measure, which may be taken by the taxpayer for themselves and their health and well-being too. And accordingly, it is suggested in the times of the COVID pandemic, and even in otherwise in the normal course, that do all the communications, do all the correspondences with the department in response to their letters in writing, and also put across to them in a very polite manner that any responses from their side also to be given in writing. This will always ensure that there is a clear-cut trail available of what has been submitted to the department, along with what documents information has been given to them. And also there arises a certain accountability on the department or a responsibility on the department, such that they also are very careful in their interactions with the SC. This will also ensure that there is no unnecessary harassment or any kind of unpleasantness which arises for the SSC in their interactions with the department officer. Coming to the letters which are sent from the department, the letters received, should be marked with the date of receipt, and especially for SCN or any orders which are being passed or the clarifications provided by the department. Why? Because in some cases, the date mentioned in the letter may be different, or the dates which are mentioned for replying by the department may have already expired by the time the SC has got the letter, either by email or by a hard copy, maybe by way of registered post. So therein, what happens is that if the letter is dated, let's say in March, and it was required to be replied, say it was dated of March 15th of 2021, required to be replied by 21st of March, but it has actually reached the SSC only by, say, the 6th of April. So that date is already gone by. Does it mean that the SC has to be held responsible for any kind of delays in the replying to the department letter, especially since the letter itself has come too late? So in these kinds of situations, it's better to preserve the covers, the letters, marked with the date, marked with the date of receipt, the seal which is there, especially for the registered post letters, that when it was actually posted and then when it has been received by the SC. And then the SC can rightfully ask for extra time to give the response to the department letters. And when the letters or notices are received over the emails, the printouts to be taken of such communication and kept for the record purposes as well. Okay. So all the communications to be perused to see which is the direction of inquiry. See, sometimes it may be just some kind of fishing expedition. More so what we are seeing, at the year end, there has been a trend or a tendency around February, March, April for the department officers to send out communications wherein it may be very vague. Saying things like kindly share a copy of the workings for the credit which has been availed for the year of say 1920. Then it is not very clear as to what is it that you're actually looking for. So one needs to be very careful and go through the communications which would have been sent. Okay. It may even be a letter which is communicating that the department is coming for audit for say 17, 18, 18, 19. But therein they say you provide all the required information, documents, records, which are as for them required to be provided, but the annexure of what all is required to be provided may be omitted, may not have been shared. So in such cases, the SSC has to be very clear that they need to be providing the information, records, documents, whatever has been sought by the department. So wherever that clarity is not there, they may like to reply politely and tell them to request them to give what are the list of the documents or the records which are required. So whenever there is any letter from the department, invariably ensure it is replied within the prescribed time given as per the provisions, and if not possible, then at least provide the available information and give a promise that the balance will be provided later on. So always, as I said, that ensure this is put across in a written or a email communication to the department, and preferable would be to send by both. Letters from the department, there may be communication with regard to SCN. So therein, if it is with regard to SCN, take a legal advice from the IDT consultants wherever required, and then only file a comprehensive reply, giving the facts and the justifications and the legal grounds. So that could avoid the issue of the SCN. So if it is a pre-SCN consultation, which is there, so that may be something which may give a clarity to the SC, and also ensure that wherever there is a strong case, that the SSC will fight it and ensure that the best possible defenses are put across, and the time, effort, and money of the SC is also getting saved. In case irrelevant or documents or sensitive nature of documents are being asked for, then wherever they are doing something like this, it is always suggested that the query may be addressed with a copy to the higher officer such as commissioner. In case they are putting across, and we have come across instances wherein the clients have been communicated to give the tally backup. Now, is it required to be given? So if they orally ask for it, then suggested maybe you politely put across as SSC to ask in writing, and then it may be provided. Otherwise, even if they are very much reluctant to do that, but keep on pressuring for the tally backup, then maybe the better way is to put it across in writing that you have asked for the tally backup on such and such a date, and as requested, we are providing, and mark a CC to the higher up. This will ensure that the respect of the officers is commanded. Communication may be with respect to the demand. So backdated acknowledgements should not be given under any circumstances, and best is communication through RPAD itself. Letter to the department, again, when it is sends a communication replied by the taxpayer, providing the information is sought. So there may be a letter or a notice asking about the transition credit availed. So they may give a certain timeline within which reply to be given. Written reply to be sent within the time set out, and acknowledged copy to be kept for the records. And in addition to email reply, as I said, this could be done. And when you're replying for these kinds of matters, only provide the information to the extent it is applicable. So if a person is not at all a trader and is only a manufacturer or service provider, then in such cases, there may not be any of the transition credit on the trading stock. So therein, they may like to only submit the information which is applicable. A service provider never has filed a excise return. So where is the question of sharing the details of the credit which has been availed in the excise return? Because it's only a service provider who has been doing this supply or provision of services. They only need to provide the ST3 return transition credit, which has been carried forward as a closing balance from the June 2017 to July 2017 through the Tran 1. Correspondences, whatever are being done, ensure it's acknowledged, as I said. And also, it is always better to send RPAD rather than hand delivery, because then they may refuse to take the delivery. They may refuse to acknowledge. Traffic is there, distance is there, pandemic situation is there. So better always is to send by registered post acknowledgement due to the concerned officer, who is the proper officer in this case. Also be very, very careful when submitting any kind of letters, information, documents to the department. Check everything, check the figures. If it's say about transition credit, check the figures of the actual transition credit which has been carried forward from the service tax returns closing balance. What was the credit on the input services, capital goods carried forward. Information provided should be factually correct. Dates, when was the Tran 1 filed, all these things has to be checked, rechecked. Justification of the actions, in case there is a reply which is being given, give all the grounds for justifying. To say that, for example, if the closing balance of ST3 credit has been taken, then better that we should also have readily available the SENVAT credit register of the past 1 year, the earlier returns also prior to the return filed for June 2017, whatever was there, everything should be kept ready, or even the invoice copies should be kept ready for the earlier 2-3 years in case it is called for, because this becomes very important, especially if there is any dispute about the Tran 1 credit, and then this leads to show cause notice and higher levels of litigation, which may get resolved only at the tribunal. Time limits which have been specified in the department correspondence should generally be followed unless it's unreasonable. Like I said, where the date is already gone by, should have replied by 21st of March and they have received the letter only by the 1st of April. So then it's impractical, it's unreasonable. Request for an extension with bona fide reasons. And also if they ask for huge amount of details or particulars relating to, let's say, any kind of inquiry pertaining to the, let's say the, wherever there is a difference between the 1 and the 3B for, let's say, the year of 18-19. So therein, if they're asking too many details, wherein there it's very difficult to provide the details, or the people are working remotely, they're not available in office, the people handling the indirect tax compliances, therein then time may be asked for. Where the stakes involved are large, even though there may be very competent people within the organization taking care of the indirect tax and its compliances, they may like to look at going to a competent consultant or a counsel while submitting these information, documents, details. Even it is suggested to get it vetted, whatever the information documents to be submitted before making all these replies. And the vetting may be done by a competent indirect tax practitioner. Types of the letters or the notices which may be likely to be received. One, what we are seeing a lot of it in the past few months is the letters citing differences between the income tax return which has been filed in GST or service tax. So they say that there is a difference as per the income tax return, certain amount of income is declared, and as per service tax or GST, there is a lower figure. So on the differential, there has been a non-payment or short payment of tax, and calling for the details reconciliation. Sometimes about non-filing of 1 and 3B, or about the non-payment of the taxes, and saying that there could be some penalties, or there has been a delay for filing of the returns. There also there may be some communications coming from the department saying the due date is done, but the return of 1 or the return of 3B has not been filed and tax is not paid. Also, there could be differences between 2A and 3B. So those will come, the credit as per 2A and 3B is not matching. Obviously, it will not match because the reverse charge credit is also there. And where is it required for? At least for 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20, and even up to the Finance Act of 2021, there was no requirement enshrined in the GST law provisions that the credit has to reflect in the 2A of the vendor in order to avail the credit by the receiver in 3B. Sometimes even if there's a difference of 1 and 3B, they can come back, give the letters, and look to make recovery of these amounts. Okay. Interest related, telling that there was delay in filing and payment of taxes. So discharge on the gross liability, the interest of 18%, not on net of ITC. Some technical errors and the TRAN 1 could not have been filed. The credit could have been taken to 3B. Here, once again, there could be the questions raised. There could be also, letters relating to Rule 36(4). Now that, the credit of as per 2A plus initially 10%, later made as 5%. They made it could be availed. That is based on the credit reflected in 2A plus first 20%, 10%, and now 5%. So those letters also could be there telling that, the credit taken is exceeding those prescribed parameters. Then also there could be letters or communications about expiry of time limit for taking credit, because after the expiry of a particular financial year, the invoices for supplies in that year from the vendors, if the credit was missed, the last day to take such credit, let's say for 2021, is within the filing of the 3B of 2021 for 21. Various investigations could be there. Fake bills is a big time item which is coming up. Valuation related queries, classification errors, ineligible refund related letters. Credit blockage also could be there, telling that there is some kind of a suspicion about the ITC, which is being taken by the SSC based on the vendor's invoices. So they may look to block the credit as well. Look at a few of these sample letters. And these are all something which has come up in the day-to-day interactions with the clients. These are the practical examples. So one was a letter about coverage in GST exemption, wherein department had sent out a communication asking the SSC, which was a company engaged in providing long-term accommodation for students along with other facilities on a long-term basis of exceeding 6 months, continuing the exemption, okay, at a later point of time. Initially, they were paying taxes. Why? Because that company was not aware that GST is exempted on the student residential dwelling for use as residence. So they paid from July 17 till October 18, they paid GST and later they claimed the exemption. So department sent a letter asking a reason why it is not taxable or why it's exempted. So herein a reply was drafted, a very detailed reply setting forth the contentions why it is exempted. And there are two entries, number 12, entry number 14 in the notification 12/17, wherein entry number 12 covers services by way of residential dwelling for use as residence. And entry number 14, the services by hotel, inn, guest house, club or campsite, whatever name called, for residential lodging purpose, having value of supply of unit of accommodation below 1,000 rupees per year equivalent. So herein the entry 12 does not set out the service has to provided by whom to whom. It could be by even a corporate, just providing the residential dwelling after having sublet it from a landlord of the building. And then it may be given for use as residence to the students for a long-term basis, wherein they have all the amenities and facilities which are there in a residential dwelling or a house. So if the end use is for the residence, then it could be covered in NT 12. And even if there are other supplies like internet, it may be electricity, they may have water, they may have the other facility like laundry, etc. All these are incidental to the residential accommodation being provided, which is exempted. It is principal supply. Principal supply is exempted. All these surrounding supplies which are incidental are also covered in that, because composite supply to be treated based on the main supply. So the intention of the law is to exempt this. However, their department had questioned. So therein, they were also eligible to the other exemption, which is the service place, which could even be a commercial space for residential purpose, having the value of supply of each unit. Now, in their case, it was each bed basis, less than 1,000 rupees per day per student. So therein all these facts were put across, telling their student was staying for more than 6 months, continuous basis, and it was being used as a housing facility for the student. And whatever was the facility was exempt at entry 12 and also at entry 14, because the amount being collected was less than 1,000 rupees per day per bed from the students. So accordingly, we communicated, got the acknowledgement from the department for the letter which was sent out, and department had accepted that submission which had been made and the coverage in the exemption claimed. There was another letter of verification of the Tran 1 credit, wherein there was a scrutiny of records done for the credit taken in Tran 1. The documents were called for within 1 week were the Tran 1 copy, ER1, ER2, which is the excise return to be filed, ST3 copies for the 6 months prior to GST, that is up to June 17. Input service invoice for the 6 months prior to GST, that is up to June 17. Capital goods credits taken records, trading stocks, other relevant documents for Tran 1. So a letter was prepared and submitted, giving the Tran 1 copy of acknowledgement, the electronic credit ledger confirming the amount of the transition credit carried forward, copy of the ER2. Therein there were ER2 returns which were applicable because it was a EOU for the period Jan 17 to June 17. Copy of the service tax return for October 16 to March 17 and April to June 17 because that was also a service provider SSC. Copy of the input service invoices for the period Jan to June 17. Copy of capital goods machines purchased on which credit was availed locally in that period. They didn't do any trading, so that was not applicable. Put it across. And then we asked them clearly, what are the other documents relevant for Tran 1 so we can provide at the earliest. And therein, actually, once all these details were submitted and attached all the copies of whatever the details which were sought of the invoices based on which credit was availed, then department did not come back thereafter. They were convinced because everything was matched and mapped and submitted to them. And then the acknowledged copy of the entire set of documents submitted was also kept for record. After some 2-3 months, this came from the the state jurisdiction office. From the central jurisdiction also, they called for the same details and then just put across a simple letter attaching all the details and the covering letter which was already submitted and told already we have done all the submissions, but kindly collect it from there. If anything further required, we will be willing to cooperate and provide the same. And there ended the matter. One more SC had availed the Tran credit in 3B under a proper covering letter. So during the reconciliation audit of their records, which was internally done, they found that during transition, they had missed to take certain SENVAT credit on the inputs and the excise return filed by them. This was a manufacturer. The quantum of the credit was 17,70,000 and odd. And then what was done was, since the time for the filing of the Tran 1 was gone by, they took directly into the 3B and they had put a letter across and gave the details of the credit and then annexure. They had the invoices to support the credit which had been raised by their vendors, and they requested for allowing such input tax credit. They raised grievance in GST portal also. There was no response. And since at that point of time, the last date to avail the input tax credit of financial year 17-18 was September 18, and this would have become a transitioned credit as a GST credit. So as a precautionary measure, they availed it in 3B for September 18. And they disclosed that in the eligible ITC. And it was equally reflected under SGST. So they had reversed the SGST to that effect. At that point of time, it would equally used to get reflected under SGST automatically. So then they requested to kindly enable to correct or confirm the action of availing the input tax in 3B. So therein, they have taken that credit under a communication to the department and put it across by a letter expressing what were the difficulties faced, that they were unable to take it into the Tran 1 and asked to confirm their action of taking it to 3B. So by this, they have ensured two things. One, there is no intention of suppression or, to take extra credit without putting it in the record. And even if, there was any such kind of a claim, since everything is in writing, these kinds of claims wouldn't stand. From the department side, alleging that there has been a suppression intention to take the wrongful credit. And also, they have not missed the credit because they have taken whatever was eligible to them, and it has come via the 3B instead of the 1 due to the Tran 1 issue, which was there as far as they were concerned. One more was that interest on delayed payment of tax under Section 50 CGST Act. Number of the SCs used to get these letters wherein it was said that the interest to be paid on the gross liability in the 3B, which was filed a little late. Some places, it may be in 1718, some places maybe even in subsequent years, because of whatever reason, maybe clerical error, maybe because of some lack of shortage of funds, etc. So if you look, there was a requirement in the Section 51 to pay the interest only in case of failure to pay tax to government, the period for which it's unpaid. And 52 empowered the central government to prescribe methodology of computation of interest, which had not been prescribed. So very valid ground when the department says to pay the interest on gross and not net of the ITC, is to say that actually no need to pay interest at all because there's no mechanism or methodology of computation prescribed. So there's a case also in BC Sinvas Setti wherein they said when the measure fails, the levy fails. Okay. This could be one of the grounds which was put across in the submissions on why no need to pay interest on delayed payment of tax. Then also the GST Council had in principle approved to charge interest on the amount payable through the electronic cash ledger after adjusting ITC. Interest would only be payable on the net amount payable in cash after deduction of the eligible ITC, and not up to the date of delayed filing of returns and the gross amount, instead on the amount in cash and up to actual payment date. Amendment of the CGST Act also. That is to say that the interest on tax payable in respect of supplies made during a tax period and declared in the return furnished after due date, except where such return is furnished after commencement of proceedings in respect of such period, shall be levied on the portion of tax paid by debiting electronic cash ledger. So what all this makes very clear, be it the GST Council 31st meeting or the amendment proposal of the Finance Act or the 39 GST Council meeting held on 14 Feb also, they all said recommendation on the interest on delayed payment of taxes, wherein recommended that interest only to be on the net tax liability paid by utilizing electronic cash ledger, give the benefit of credit to SC, no need to pay interest to that extent because government has already got its money from the vendors. Also, subsequently, press release came. There was to say that there would be no proceedings or demands raised wherever sufficient credit was there with effect from 1/7/2017, and law to be amended also in that respect retrospectively. Even Finance Act 2021 has made this aspect of it quite clear that this favorable interpretation itself would be applicable, and also this applicability would be there from the beginning. Of course, when we replied to this matter, we also put forth the relevant cases, which were there. That Allied Motors, there was a case wherein even where there was a proviso which has been inserted to say that the taxes to be paid on the net of credit. So it is only something which was to be read into the section because it was an omission and it was inserted to make the entire section workable. So it is applicable from 1st of July 2017 onwards. Other cases were also there of Madras High Court Reflex was there, wherein they said that the proviso is inserted to correct anomaly as it existed prior to insertion and should be taken as clarificatory. Some other cases also were there, landmark judgment being Pratibha Processors of Supreme Court, wherein they said interest is compensatory in character and imposed on the SCUs withheld payment of tax as and when due and payable, because the levy of interest is on the actual amount of tax withheld. And actually, if you see when to the extent of the tax which has already been reached from the vendors in respect of which ITC has been taken, there is no withheld tax from the government. Okay. And also in Eicher Motors, Supreme Court said that the credit is a vested right and the facility of credit is as good as tax paid. So wherever there has been this kind of a demand raised, or even for the past 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20, this kind of a response to say that the interest on delayed payment of tax should be done only on the net and not on the gross. Net after taking the credit benefit has been now upheld by the amendments which have been made in the Act itself, including the latest proposals of Section 50 of the GST Act, which has been given under the Finance Act of 2021. So, how was the reply drafted? Such that firstly, no interest levy because there was no computation mechanism. Even assuming but not accepting the levy is attracted, it will be on the net amount payable in cash, citing the subsequent proviso inserted, then the amendments by the Finance Act 2021, and thus computation of interest on gross amount not being tenable. So whatever the subsequent developments by way of the amendments have made, only confirms our stand which we had taken, that interest should be only to the extent of the net tax liability in respect of delayed payment of tax. Blocking of electronic credit ledger of company also happened in the case of one of the SSCs last year suddenly, just before the lockdown. What happened was when this SSC, which was doing testing services, logged in to the GST portal on 27th of Jan 2020, the balance was displayed as nil and description coming as temporary blocking of credit by department to the electronic credit ledger. So they had around 4 crores of credit after filing 3B, which was duly reflected in books based on vendor invoice, which were paid, the amounts paid, tax paid, vendors have filed returns, credit was there, and other documents were there with them, including the invoices for this credit. And there was no communication by letter or any notice, reasons, emails, nothing. So if you saw, this was a fundamental breach of the principle of natural justice, because an opportunity of being heard was required to be given, which was nowhere there until they got this, login and this rude shock. So there have been rulings like Dharampal Satyapal Limited in Supreme Court where they said principle of natural justice to be mandatorily applied irrespective of whether there's a statutory provision or not. And also, if you go back to the budget speech of the Finance Minister of India, said that we'd like to reassure taxpayers that we remain committed to taking measures so that citizens are free from harassment of any kind. So all these, further went into our letter to emphasize that there was a departure from the principles of natural justice, and this amounted to a kind of a harassment because they are not able to, freely use the credit which is available, rightly earned by them in the electronic credit ledger. So if we are to see the amount which is available in the electronic credit ledger could have been used for making payment towards the output tax liability, and the balance was a part of working capital, and ad hoc debits given without intimation would affect the business. So all these points we put across, including the extract of the budget speech, including, putting across that there was violation of principles of natural justice. ITC is indefeasible and statutory right cannot be taken away by ad hoc debits being done, and requested to recredit the ledger at the earliest to enable the ease of doing business. So the net outcome which came, because we also sent it by registered post acknowledgement due this particular submissions, they lifted it within the next 1 month, it was unblocked. Credit ledger was unblocked to the SSC. Okay, and this letter was sent to the respective officer of the range and also a CC to the local commissioner also. Coming to another issue which was there, wherein the letter was about discharge of GST liability through DRC 13. There's a client of ours, which was a company registered under Companies Act. And the service provider, these are of course all fictitious names used here, but the situation is a real situation which you have come across. So the service provider said they had already discharged the tax liability on the invoices raised to the recipient company. Department communicated that you already hold the rent amount which is supposed to be paid to the owner. Due to the non-payment of the GST on the rental income, you have to hold the rent as per detection. Now, we're directing your good self to remit the rental amount directly to the GST account and give the GST numbers. The reply given was, We understand that for recovery of GST from third person from whom money is due or may become due to defaulter, a notice has to be given in DRC 13 and served in accordance with the Section 79, Section 1C, read with the GST rules, Rule 145. And since there was no such notice, therefore not liable to pay any amount to the department due to the reasons given above. And this was correct because there was a bypassing of all the required format of the notice to be given and the requirement of giving this DRC 13, all that had been not at all followed by the departmental officer. So this was put across and clearly informed that no requirement on the SC to make any payment of the amount held on account of the vendor to the department. Okay. So therein also department considered the submission which was sent to them, duly acknowledged, and this matter also was dropped therein. By then their vendor also paid and had settled all the dues up to date, and he was filing the returns of the 1 and the 3B. Non-registration and non-filing of service tax return. So there was a clinical establishment engaged in provision of healthcare services, and wherein they got a letter of service tax period telling that the healthcare services, though they may be providing, they said why they are not registered and why they are not paying the service tax for the particular year, which was, I think, somewhere of 15-16. So they put across clearly by way of a letter that the healthcare service exempted from the service tax in the notification 25/12, and there was a clear-cut exemption for the services provided by way of disease, diagnosis, treatment, care of disease, disorders, or abnormalities. Only engaged in providing exempt healthcare services and not providing taxable services, nor availing service where under reverse charge as a service recipient, they were not liable to pay service tax. They put across the reasons, put across the draft very clearly, took a printout on their letterhead expressing with these reasons not liable for registration and no liability to pay the service tax, which again was accepted and the matter got dropped. Verification of the service tax liability for the financial year 2014-15 with regard to one particular company. So here again, there was a company which was engaged in the market development, technical consultation, management consultation, market support service to the parent company in the US against the consideration on cost plus. So the department sent a letter alleging it's doing intermediary service and place of supply is India. Promptly a reply was submitted against this, telling that service tax is only when the services are provided in the taxable territory of India. And also these services were not intermediary because it was not being supply or enabling the supply of any goods or services between any other two persons, but on own account, these services were being provided to the client. And consequently, it came under the place of provision of service rules, Rule 3, not under the Rule 9. And the place of supply is the location of the service receiver, which was in the USA. And the services are support services, which were of the nature of advisory services, market development, market research, and various other kinds of consultative services. And consequently, as place of provision of service outside India, in that period, in the service tax law, once the place of provision of service outside India, it's not liable to service tax. There was no requirement of LUT like we have today in GST in order to ensure that no need to pay any GST on the exported services. So therein it ended the matter. There was no liability, no interest, no requirement at all to discharge the tax liability of service tax. One more kind of a letter which does come is the difference in tax paid as per 1 and 3B. We have seen a lot of this in the past 1 year, wherein department sends the letter telling there are differences. Sometimes there may be a true clerical error due to which there's a short payment, wherein we had one of the companies which had made a short payment in August 17. So they rectified it voluntarily with interest and disclosed in the 3B of July 18. And they asked for an acknowledgement also to that effect. Okay. Availment of the excess ITC. Now, this is something also for which lots of letters have been obtained by the SCs. And as we are aware that under Rule 36(4), they said with effect from 9/10/2019, the credit could be availed only based on the 2A plus 20%. Subsequently, from Jan, they made it as 10%, and this year in Jan, they made it as 5% of the credit reflected in 2A. So there was an email communication to one of the SCs alleging that excess credit was taken and asking the reasons why in the month of December 19. So therein, the point which was there is, first of all, that the could take the credit even without it getting reflected in 2A, because 2A is only a SC facilitation measure, even as per the department circular. And consequently, the credit could not be denied. And sometimes there may be some delay in the filing of the return by the supplier also. And consequently, there may be a gap for reflecting the credit into the 2A as well. And also the point is that as long as within the next year, September, the vendor has regularized and paid all the taxes for these invoices under which supplies were made to the recipient, there should not be any issue. And even assuming that the returns were not filed, due to default by the vendor or faults of the vendor, the credit cannot be denied to the recipient. Similarly held in Arise India Limited, KK Industries under the erstwhile VAT as well as the excise law by the Supreme Court of India. Okay. So reply was filed on those grounds, and also the reconciliation attached. Of course, therein also some part of the excess ITC was because reverse charge was there. That will not come in 2A. So then that was put in the record and communicated to the department. The matter was closed because they were able to reconcile and provide as well the details. Okay. There we also put across that based on these grounds, whatever I just now expressed, credit availed would not get restricted and entitled to take such eligible input tax credit. With this, I've come to the end of the session. If there are any queries whatsoever, feel free to drop me a mail to rupa@hiregange.com. Thanks a lot for the patience hearing, and I hope that you would always come back to me for any queries in this regard. Thanks a lot.